They say the most dangerous secrets are the ones that wear a smile. From the outside, the Whitmore household looked like something lifted from a family therapy brochure. Sun-drenched porch, a wind chime singing in the breeze, and flower beds that bloomed obediently with every season. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no police sirens in the dead of night. Just the hum of a peaceful suburban life in North Carolina, where everyone knew everyone's dog's name, but not necessarily their neighbor's heartache. And if you drove by on a Sunday morning, you'd probably catch them, Grace and her daughter Lana, sipping orange juice on the porch swing, laughing about nothing and everything. To the world, they were not just close, they were inseparable. The kind of mother-daughter pair that made people believe in soul ties. The kind that made strangers say, "Wow, I hope my daughter and I turn out like them someday." But if you stared just a little too long, you might notice the subtle choreography, the rehearsed timing in their smiles, the way Grace would gently redirect conversations when they veered too close to the past, how Lana never asked about her father, not because she didn't wonder, but because every question had been deflected so gracefully, so masterfully, that she learned to treat the subject like a cracked teacup, delicate and best left untouched. Grace Whitmore had mastered the art of presentation. She was a florist, after all. She knew how to trim the thorns, how to arrange things in just the right light so the flaws didn't show. She could make a wilting bouquet look like it had bloomed that morning. And in many ways, that's what she did with her life, carefully curated the illusion of harmony, of joy, of wholeness. And Lana, 16, bright-eyed, whip-smart, and already wrestling with the gentle ache of a question that had no face. Why do I feel like something's missing? But she didn't say it aloud. Not yet. There was still laughter in the kitchen. There were still surprise birthday cakes and handwritten notes in lunchboxes. There was still a calendar of dreams and college tours and someday conversations. Until the day everything changed. This isn't a story about abuse, or poverty, or obvious trauma. This is the quieter kind. The kind that builds itself like a spider's web, beautiful, delicate, nearly invisible, until one gust of truth tears it apart. For 16 years, Grace kept a secret sealed behind the kind of motherly love that feels eternal. And for 16 years, Lana lived a lie, dressed in warmth, comfort, and carefully chosen half-truths. What neither of them knew was that truth has a timeline. And in the age of home DNA kits and digital ancestry maps, secrets that once took lifetimes to unravel now come with a tracking number and an ETA. The storm was coming. But for now, the house was still quiet. The coffee was still warm. And somewhere between a hug and a lie, a mother still kissed her daughter goodnight, holding on to one more evening of peace. Before the truth arrived, in a little white envelope, Lana Whitmore never realized that silence could echo louder than sound. In the still corners of her childhood, it was the questions that were never asked, and the ones never answered, that haunted her most. There was no boogeyman in the closet, no monsters under her bed, just a faint, persistent whisper in the walls of her memory. Quiet, elusive, and strangely unfinished. From as early as she could remember, there were things in her life that didn't quite fit, like a jigsaw puzzle with pieces that almost connected but left tiny gaps, noticeable only if you cared enough to look. And Lana cared. "Why don't I have a dad?" was the very first question. It came at 6, when other kids were bringing in their fathers for career day. She had drawn a picture of a man with no face, no job title, and no backstory, just a stick figure labeled Dad. Grace had smiled, tight-lipped. "You and I? We're special, honey. A team. Some kids have dads. You have me." First, it was enough. But over time, enough started to itch. There were rules in the Whitmore house. Not many, but the few that existed were etched in stone. Rule number 1. No questions about the past, especially anything before Lana was born. Family history. Messy. Old photos? Misplaced. Any relatives? All gone, sweetie. Rule number 2. Never send your DNA anywhere. Grace didn't just discourage those online ancestry tests. She practically made them sound demonic. "Those companies sell your information," she'd say with a nervous laugh. masking something sharper underneath. Besides, who cares what our genes say? We're defined by what we do, not where we came from. Rule number 3. Always answer questions with smiles, not truth. It wasn't spoken, just modeled. When neighbors asked about Lana's father, Grace would flash that disarming smile, tilt her head, and say, "It's just been the two of us, and we've done just fine, haven't we?" Lana learned early on that adults admire tidy stories, and messy ones make people uncomfortable. But the strange part wasn't just what was missing, it was how intentionally it was erased. There were no baby albums, no birth certificate in her school files, no family heirlooms. The only picture she ever saw of Grace as a young woman was a blurry, sun-faded snapshot in a cheap dollar store frame, tucked in the hallway behind a cracked vase. It didn't add up. Not for someone as organized as Grace. 13, Lana started keeping a journal. Not of her own life, but of clues. Every offhand remark Grace let slip. Every strange silence at family events. What family events? Every time her mother would stare too long at the television whenever a certain type of man was on screen. Tall, dark-haired, deep voice, and then shake her head like waking from a trance. She began to notice things. Her blood type didn't match Grace's. Her hair texture and skin tone suggested a mixed heritage. But Grace, porcelain-skinned with red undertones, had never once addressed it. School forms were always filled out in a rush, skipping the line that said, "Father's name." And then there were the dreams. Recurring, vivid dreams of a man's voice, warm, low, kind. Unfamiliar, yet comforting. She'd wake up crying sometimes, and Grace would just hold her and whisper, "You're okay. You have everything you need right here." But Lana didn't feel whole. She felt like a house built on secrets, painted to look new. The whispers in the walls were getting louder. And while Grace could plaster over the cracks with birthday balloons, movie nights, and promises of girl-only vacations, something inside Lana had already begun to unravel. Something that wouldn't be silenced by love alone. And soon, she would follow the whispers, to the truth her mother had buried 16 years ago. The truth waiting just beneath the floorboards of a perfect life. Curiosity is a dangerous kind of hunger. Once fed, it never shrinks again. For Lana Whitmore, that hunger began to stir at 15. Quiet at first, like a flickering pilot light. But soon it roared into something more. A relentless need to know. It wasn't that she wanted to expose her mother or unravel their perfect bond. She just wanted to feel grounded, to stop living like a borrowed character in a half-finished story. Her life had always been filled with almosts and maybes. Maybe your dad was a traveler. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe he didn't want to be found. But maybe isn't something a child can build an identity on. It's a ghost of a truth, and ghosts don't hold hands when you're scared at night. By now, Lana had outgrown bedtime stories and Disney finales. She had grown into someone who noticed the weight behind her mother's silences. Someone who started asking her own questions when no one was watching. That was when the school project came. Family tree, know your roots. Of all the weeks for such an assignment to land, it came during a time when Lana's suspicions were already bubbling beneath the surface. The class was excited, eager to compare heritage, trace bloodlines, and show off ancestry maps printed from online DNA sites. But for Lana, it felt like walking into a trap. At first, she approached it like she always did, copying what little Grace had told her. Mother, Grace Whitmore. Father, siblings, none. Relatives. She turned in a skeleton of a tree. No branches, no roots, just a single trunk, her mother. Her teacher, Mrs. Ellison, returned it with a gentle note in red pen. Lana, let me know if you'd like help exploring this further. You deserve to know where you come from. That line hit harder than it should have. After school, Lana came home determined. Grace was in the kitchen, humming to an old jazz vinyl, her hands dusted with flour. Lana watched her for a moment, not just as a daughter, but as an investigator. Every movement seemed too practiced. Every smile is a little too polished. "Mom," Lana began cautiously, "do we have any old family albums?" I need them for a school project. Grace didn't flinch, but her eyes paused mid-blink, just for a breath. Then she turned back to the dough, casual as ever. Oh, sweetheart, I've told you, we weren't really a picture family. Everything important is right here. She touched her heart. That night, Lana waited until Grace was asleep. She tiptoed into the attic, a place that hadn't been opened in years. The door creaked like it had secrets of its own. Dust curled in the air like breath held too long. She sifted through boxes marked seasonal, Christmas, baby stuff. And then, beneath a stack of frayed blankets, she found a cracked leather folder.
No labels.
No tags, just age and silence. Inside it, nestled between brittle pages, was a photograph. One she had never seen before. It was faded, tinged yellow with time, but clear enough. In it, a young Grace sat on a park bench, no older than 20. Her hair was longer, darker, wild in the wind. Her smile looked real. Not the one she wore now, but a freer version of it. And next to her, arm casually draped around her shoulder, was a man Lana had never seen. He was tall, lean, with skin a few shades deeper than hers, and eyes that mirrored Lana's own, warm brown, almond-shaped, with a spark that felt familiar. On the back of the photo was a single word, scribbled in blue ink. October. No year. No name. Just a whisper of a memory trapped in paper. Lana stared at it for a long time. Something deep inside her shifted, like finding a door that had been hidden behind wallpaper your entire life. It wasn't just a photo. It was evidence that someone else had existed, that her life had chapters she'd never been told about. She wanted to run to her mother, to demand answers, but part of her already knew what Grace would say. She'd smile. She'd redirect. She'd say something like, "Some things are better left in the past." But Lana was no longer a little girl asking nicely. She was becoming a storm, and the lies that held up her world were now starting to crack. One photograph at a time. Not all lies are told aloud. Some are etched into the choices we make, the memories we erase, and the names we refuse to speak. Grace Whitmore had always been a woman of poise, graceful in manner, polished in speech, and meticulous in how she managed her image. But beneath that soft exterior was a fortress, one built not of stone, but of silence. And at the heart of that silence, there lived a single, unrelenting truth. Lana's life began with a lie. Grace never meant to keep it forever. At first, the silence felt like a placeholder, something temporary, a kindness, a shield. But as years passed and Lana's eyes began to resemble his, and her voice carried the same lilt as his, the truth became heavier, more dangerous, like a fire too bright to look at, yet too close to ignore. So Grace buried it, and in its place, she built a love so fierce, so flawless, it would make the truth unnecessary. But no secret stays buried forever. 17 years earlier, a smoky campus party. Vinyl music thumped through the walls. Grace, a sophomore majoring in English literature, wore a red scarf that made her feel more interesting than she actually believed she was. She hadn't planned to attend, but her roommate insisted. That's where she saw him. Isaiah Carter. He wasn't the loudest. He didn't command attention with bravado. But when he laughed, low, rich, and genuine, people turned. He wasn't just handsome. He was magnetic. Charisma without effort. And Grace, raised in a conservative household where appearances mattered more than authenticity, was drawn to that rare energy like a moth to flame. They talked for hours that night. About books, about music, about how both of them felt like observers in a world that spun too fast. One drink turned into 3. Midnight became morning. And by dawn, something irreversible had happened. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was real. And that scared Grace more than anything. Isaiah was brilliant, headed to law school, active in student advocacy, sharp as a whip. But he wasn't safe in the way her parents had taught her to desire. He didn't come from money. He didn't belong to her world of curated tea parties and whitewashed expectations. And more than that, he was black. When Grace discovered she was pregnant, she panicked. Isaiah wanted to step up. He wasn't perfect, but he was committed. He wrote letters, called, left voicemails. Grace's silence cut him sharper than any blade, but she had already made up her mind. Not because she didn't love him, but because she couldn't face what it meant to love him out loud. Her parents would have disowned her. Her community would have whispered. Her future, tied tightly to appearances, would have cracked beneath the weight of scandal. So she made a choice. She left school, moved 3 states away, told everyone that the father wasn't in the picture. And that was that. She crafted a narrative so clean, so airtight, even she started to believe parts of it. Isaiah never got the chance to know his daughter, and Lana never got the chance to know her father. All because one woman made a decision at the crossroads of fear and pride. Grace told herself she'd reveal the truth someday, when Lana was older, when she could handle it. But the years passed, and each birthday made the lie more fragile. She didn't tell the truth, not because she didn't want to, but because she no longer knew how to. How do you explain to your daughter that her entire life was built on your cowardice? How do you tell her the man whose eyes she sees in the mirror every morning isn't a ghost, but a living, breathing man who wanted her? So she buried the photo, burned the letters, and swore to carry the lie to her grave. But graves don't keep secrets when DNA tests exist. And Lana was about to light the match that would reduce it all to ash. Sometimes, the most innocent gifts carry the heaviest consequences. Lana had never been one for big parties or glittery displays. For her 16th birthday, all she wanted was something different, something meaningful. She didn't know why the idea had taken root, but there it was, a DNA test. The sleek kind she'd seen influencers rave about online. Discover your roots. Trace your ancestry. Find out who you really are. It was marketed as fun, enlightening. What it became was a wrecking ball. She asked for it casually, offhand, as if it were just a passing curiosity. Grace had hesitated, just for a second, a tight pause between pouring orange juice and her next breath. Then she smiled that same too-practiced smile and said, "If it means that much to you, sure, it'll be our little science experiment." But Lana could feel it, that tension so subtle it was nearly invisible, like the air shifting before a thunderstorm. Grace tried, in the days that followed, to casually dissuade her. "You know those things aren't always accurate, right?" she offered one morning. "They sell your information," she warned another afternoon. But Lana was already hooked. She needed to know, not just where she came from, but who she came from. The photo she'd found in the attic, the man whose arm draped around Grace, had awakened something in her that no bedtime story ever could. She spit into the vial, sealed it, and mailed it off like a girl sending a letter to her future self. She thought the results would take weeks. They arrived in 5 days. Lana opened the email after school, legs crossed on her bedroom floor, laptop glowing dimly in the twilight. Subject: "Your DNA results are in." She clicked, and her world cracked like glass underfoot. Instead of answers, she found questions she hadn't been prepared to ask. The ancestry breakdown was surprising. Over 40% African heritage, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Bantu origins. A wave of wonder rushed through her, followed quickly by confusion. She stared at the screen. Her reflection in the laptop was pale and shaken. Her mother, red-haired, fair-skinned, blue-eyed, couldn't account for this. She scrolled further. Under close family matches, it should have listed Grace Whitmore as a parent, but instead, the space beside mother showed a gray icon and one line of text. No immediate match found. First, she thought it was a mistake. Maybe she entered the wrong code. Maybe she misread something. She refreshed the page, logged in again, waited, but the truth remained clinical and cold. "You are not a match." In a matter of seconds, Lana's entire sense of self began to disintegrate. The woman who raised her, bathed her, bandaged her scraped knees, stayed up on sick nights, and loved her fiercely, was not her biological mother? No, that couldn't be. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the lab made a mistake. Maybe it was a glitch. But the more she searched, the more impossible it became to deny what her gut already knew. Grace had lied. About everything. Lana didn't cry, not immediately. She just sat there, frozen. The walls of her room, once filled with warmth and familiarity, now felt sterile and strange. Every childhood memory, the park swings, the snow angels, the lullabies, suddenly felt suspicious, as if they had been staged, performed for the sake of a lie. And beneath it all, a deeper question pulsed like a heartbeat. If Grace isn't my biological mother, who is? And perhaps even worse, why did she raise me as her own? The DNA kit had promised answers. Instead, it had ignited a bomb. And Lana, now 16, raw and disoriented, was standing in the blast zone. Lana didn't sleep that night. She paced. She cried. She Googled. She reread the DNA results 100 times, looking for a loophole, a missing line, anything that could make this make sense. But truth doesn't flinch under scrutiny. And when the morning sun bled through her blinds, she knew exactly what she had to do. The storm had been brewing for years. Now it was time to let it rain. Grace was in the kitchen, whisking pancake batter, humming like it was any other Sunday. The smell of cinnamon and maple syrup filled the air. But for Lana, it all reeked of performance. A play her mother had been rehearsing for 16 years. Lana stood at the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, laptop clutched to her chest like a weapon. Why isn't your name on the DNA match? The words weren't shouted. They were spoken low, steady, sharp enough to cut clean. Grace froze mid-whisk. The room fell silent except for the slow drip of the faucet. She turned, trying to smile, but her face couldn't hold it. Not this time. Her eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to Lana. "What are you talking about, sweetie?" she said softly, too softly. "Don't, please," Lana whispered. "Not today. Just tell me the truth." There it was, bare, trembling between them. Grace sat down slowly at the kitchen table, her body suddenly decades older. And then she sighed, long and hollow, like someone finally letting go of a breath they didn't realize they'd been holding for years. "I was 21 when I met your birth mother," Grace began, her voice brittle. Lana's eyes widened. "She was in trouble," Grace continued. "Young, scared, with no support. She didn't have the means to raise a child. She was halfway through the pregnancy when I met her through a community program. I was volunteering. At first, it was just tutoring, helping with doctor's appointments." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "She didn't want to keep you. She made that clear. She was going to terminate. But then something changed. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. I don't know. She carried you to term, and when you were born, she handed you to me." Lana's heart slammed against her ribs. "Wait, I'm adopted." "Yes," Grace's voice cracked. "But it wasn't formal. It wasn't legal. Not in the traditional sense. It was quiet. Between us." She signed the temporary guardianship paperwork. And then she disappeared. "But why didn't you tell me?" Grace looked at her, eyes swimming in regret. "Because I didn't want you to feel unwanted. I didn't want your first truth to be rejection. I thought I could love you enough to erase the pain before it ever had the chance to bloom. I thought, if I told you later, when you were older, it would be easier." "It's not," Lana said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's worse." Grace stood and walked to the cabinet. She pulled down a faded envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, the guardianship form. At the bottom, "Lena Carter, biological mother. I promised her I'd protect you, that I'd give you everything she couldn't." "And my father?" Grace hesitated. "His name was Isaiah. He never knew about you. Your mother never told him. I didn't even have a way to contact him. He was just a shadow in the story." Lana sat in stunned silence. Her entire life had just split open, and the woman she loved most had been both her savior and the architect of the lie that kept her in the dark. "I'm so sorry, Lana," Grace whispered. "I never stopped being your mother. I loved you from the second I saw you, but I was selfish. I let fear make decisions love should have." For the first time in her life, Lana saw her mother completely. Not as the unshakable protector, not as the keeper of order, but as a flawed, terrified human being who had tried to rewrite fate. And now, sitting across from the truth, Lana had to decide whether that was something she could forgive. But that choice would come later. Right now, she just sat there, silent, stunned, and reshaped, because the truth had finally come home, and nothing would ever be the same. Some names change everything when spoken. Isaiah Carter was one of them. Until now, Lana's father had been a ghost, an absence, a blank space on every school form and family tree. She'd imagined him 1,000 different ways. Artist, soldier, runaway, hero, villain, but never real, never flesh and blood. Now, with her mother's tear-soaked confession still echoing in her ears, she had a name, a real person, and with that came a wave of dizzying possibility. She searched that night. She typed Isaiah Carter into every search bar she could find. Added terms like lawyer, North Carolina, civil rights. Took hours. But eventually, the screen gave her what she was looking for, and it nearly knocked the air from her lungs. There he was, not in some grainy mugshot or anonymous obituary, but in headlines. Isaiah Carter, civil rights attorney and social justice advocate, speaks at National Equity Summit. Author, educator, father figure to a generation. His image stared back at her, older, yes. Silver dusted his hair now, but the shape of his face was unmistakable. So was the fire in his eyes. Her fire. Lana read everything she could find. Law reviews, interviews, speeches where he spoke about building systems that uplift forgotten voices. His passion wasn't a performance. It radiated through the words. And yet, through it all, not once did he mention a daughter. Not even a hint. She stared at a photo of him shaking hands with a senator, his smile wide and sincere. And for the first time, she didn't feel proud. She felt erased. Isaiah Carter wasn't just some man who had disappeared. He was somebody. He had written books, mentored students, fought landmark cases that reshaped housing laws in underserved communities. He was lauded as the man who never gave up on anyone, except, apparently, her. The contradiction burned in Lana's chest. How could he leave me? She whispered aloud, scrolling through a list of his achievements. How could he live this whole life and not wonder if I existed? But the truth wasn't that simple. Rarely is. The next morning, Lana confronted Grace again. This time, not with accusations, but questions. Did he ever try to find me? She asked. Grace hesitated, not because she didn't know, but because the shame was hard to swallow. No, she said finally, but only because I never told him you were born. Lana blinked. What? Grace swallowed hard, her eyes glossy with the weight of it all. When your birth mother gave you to me, she told me Isaiah wasn't ready, that he would just complicate things. She made me promise I'd never involve him. She said he wasn't the kind of man who'd want to be tied down. Grace looked away. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to believe her. So he never knew? Not a word. As far as he knows, you were never real. The room spun. Isaiah Carter, the man she'd quietly resented for never looking, had never been given the chance. The man who spent his life fighting for other people's children had been denied his own. It wasn't abandonment. It was an absence. By design. Lana didn't speak for a long time after that, because now she wasn't just carrying betrayal. She was carrying two lives, one she'd lived, and one she was never allowed to have. A man who looked like her, thought like her, walked through the world with a fire that now made sense, was out there, and whether he knew it or not, his daughter had just found him. The next chapter wouldn't be about grief or rage. It would be about a meeting 16 years overdue. Truth, when released too suddenly, doesn't mend, it fractures. And the truth Lana had unearthed didn't just break a silence. It shattered an entire world. The Whitmore home, once filled with warmth and shared laughter, now echoed with cold pauses and sharp, unfinished sentences. There were no more pancake mornings, no spontaneous movie nights. Just the constant suffocating presence of a single truth neither of them could bury again. Grace was not Lana's biological mother, and she had kept it a secret for 16 years. It began with space. Lana stopped calling Grace Mom, not out of cruelty, but from confusion. The word felt like a costume now, ill-fitting and heavy. Then came the locked bedroom doors, the silent dinners, the sense that they were two strangers rehearsing a life they no longer shared. Grace tried to reach her, left apology notes on Lana's pillow, cooked her favorite meals, hoping the smell of roasted garlic or fresh-baked cookies might remind her of better days. But nothing tasted the same anymore. Everything felt tainted. "I still raised you," Grace whispered one night, standing outside Lana's locked door. "Yes," Lana replied, voice shaking. "But you didn't trust me. You loved me with conditions. That's not the same." It wasn't anger anymore. It was heartbreak. A grief for a relationship that had been real and fake, all at once. And in the quiet of their brokenness, Lana did something she knew would change everything. She told the world. It started with a single post on her private blog, a place where Lana often poured out thoughts she never voiced aloud. The title was simple: "I found out I'm adopted, and my mother never told me." She didn't name Grace. She didn't have to. The story, raw and gut-wrenching, went viral within 48 hours. A TikTok video followed, then podcast requests, then the news segment, "Teen uncovers hidden adoption through DNA kit." The comment sections were a war zone. That mother had no right. She did what she had to. She saved that child. This is what happens when people treat children like secrets. She's lucky someone wanted her. Adoption without consent is theft. It wasn't just a family crisis anymore. It was content. And Grace, once a quiet florist in a quiet town, was now the villain in a narrative playing out across phones and laptops everywhere. Strangers dissected her motives. Neighbors whispered in the grocery aisles. Church friends stopped making eye contact. Lana had told her truth, but in doing so, she had set fire to Grace's entire reputation. And while that fire felt like justice at first, it soon left ashes. Neither of them knew how to live in. It didn't take long for the news to reach distant relatives. Cousins, aunts, second cousins who hadn't been heard from in years. Some offered support. "I always felt something was off," one cousin texted. "You're brave," another wrote. "I wish I had spoken up when I suspected." But not everyone was sympathetic. Grace's older sister, Marion, was furious. "You ungrateful little girl," she messaged Lana. "Do you have any idea what that woman gave up for you? She saved you. And now you've painted her as a monster because you didn't get a bedtime story about your birth parents." Others were more subtle, avoiding calls, declining family dinners, posting cryptic Bible verses about betrayal and honor on Facebook. The Whitmore name, once associated with community and care, now lived in whispers and side eyes. Grace, who had only ever tried to keep Lana safe, found herself isolated, not because she didn't love enough, but because she had loved too quietly, too controllingly, too selfishly. And Lana? She was alone in a different way, surrounded by noise, yet still searching for peace. She had the truth now, but at what cost? The fallout was not just emotional, it was generational. A fault line had opened in the family, and no one was walking away without cracks. And still, on the horizon, something even bigger loomed. The decision to reach out to the man who had never known she existed. The real father. Because sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. And Lana was already walking. Healing is not cinematic. It doesn't arrive with violins or dramatic apologies. It comes in slow, halting steps, like learning how to walk again after falling from a great height. For Lana Whitmore, healing didn't begin with a hug. It began with distance. The first therapy session was awkward. Lana sat stiffly, arms crossed, eyes on the carpet, as the counselor asked, "So, Lana, what do you feel today?" "Everything," she said. Then, with a shrug, "And nothing." It took weeks before she stopped editing her feelings. Months before, she spoke of Grace without venom. But therapy gave her a space to untangle the hurt, to separate what was real from what was reaction. Grace, too, found her way to a therapist, and for once she had no control. She cried in sessions. She admitted her fear of losing Lana had been so deep, so all-consuming, she hadn't realized she'd smothered the truth along with the lie. Then came the letters. The first arrived in a pale blue envelope. From Grace, handwritten. "You have every right to hate me. I lied, and in doing so, I broke your trust, maybe beyond repair. But you've always been mine, Lana. Not because I gave birth to you, because I chose you. Every single day. I still do. I will always do." Lana didn't respond right away, but she didn't throw it away either. The second letter came 2 weeks later. Then a third. Eventually, Lana wrote back. Short, guarded, honest. "You chose me, yes, but I didn't get to choose back. That's the part that hurts." And so began the slow dance of reconciliation, one word at a time.
No dramatic reunions.
Just cautious hope, rewritten into a language they could both understand. Lana eventually met her biological father, Isaiah Carter, in a small, quiet cafe halfway between their cities. The encounter was everything and nothing like she imagined. He was nervous. She was angry. He apologized for not being there, for not knowing, for not fighting for a truth he never had access to. "I would have loved you," he said. Lana believed him, but this meeting wasn't about reclaiming a lost childhood. It was about understanding herself, the parts that made her whole. They exchanged stories, photos, and even quirks. They laughed at the way they both hated cucumbers, cried over the years they'd never get back. But Lana learned something crucial in that cafe. Blood connects us, but it doesn't define us. She realized she didn't have to choose between Grace and Isaiah. She didn't have to cut one out to embrace the other. She was her own person now, an echo of both, yet a reflection of neither. Forgiveness, Lana learned, is not about pretending the pain never happened. It's about choosing not to let it own you. It didn't happen overnight. She and Grace still argued, still tiptoed around raw places, but slowly the walls lowered, the doors unlocked, the wounds still tender began to close. Forgiveness looked like shared meals with less silence, like sitting on opposite ends of the couch and watching old family videos. Not with bitterness but curiosity, like Grace admitting, "I was wrong," without defensiveness, like Lana saying, "I still don't fully trust you," and Grace replying, "I'll wait." It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough for now. In time, Lana returned to her blog. She wrote a new post titled, "How I Lost 2 Parents and Found 3. She ended it with this: "Family is not just who births you or raises you. It's who shows up when the truth breaks everything open. It's who stays when the pieces don't fit neatly anymore. And forgiveness is not letting someone off the hook. It's letting yourself stop bleeding." The scars remained, but they no longer told a story of betrayal. They told a story of survival, growth, and love, brave enough to come back from ruin. And in that, there was peace. Dear listener, if you've come this far, then maybe you're wondering the same thing I've asked myself 100 different ways. What would you have done? Would you have lied to protect a child from pain? Would you have told the truth and risked losing everything you held dear? Or maybe, like my mother, you would have chosen silence, because sometimes silence feels like the safest version of love. This story isn't neat. It doesn't have the kind of ending that ties up in a beautiful bow. But that's what makes it honest. And honesty, I've learned, is what I needed all along. I'm not the same girl who sat on a porch swing thinking her life was ordinary. I've met the truth, looked it in the eye, and lived to tell the story. That truth broke me, but it also freed me. I now understand my mother not just as mom, but as a woman flawed, frightened, fiercely protective. A woman who loved me so much she built an entire world out of omission. And while I wish she'd chosen differently, I finally see the weight she carried. I still grieve the years I lived a version of myself edited for comfort. But I also celebrate the woman I've become through that unraveling. Bolder, wiser, unapologetically curious, unafraid of truth. To every mother holding a secret like a grenade in your chest, I know you think silence is safety, that a hidden truth can protect a child from a world that isn't always kind. But I promise you this, lies do not disappear. They ferment. They grow sharp edges in the dark. You may think you're shielding them, but one day, the truth will surface. In a DNA test, a stray photo, an overheard conversation. And when it does, the betrayal will be louder than the truth itself. Tell your story, even if it trembles out of your mouth, even if it takes time. Tell it before someone else or something else does. Give your child the dignity of knowing where they come from, because one day they'll go looking, and what they find may define you both. My mother's silence wasn't meant to hurt me, but intention doesn't erase impact. Her legacy won't be the lie she told. It will be the courage it took to finally confess. The nights she stayed up writing me letters trying to rebuild. The look in her eyes when she said, "I will never lie to you again. Truth has a cost. So does silence. But only one of them can lead to healing." I don't tell this story to shame my mother. I tell it so someone else might be braver sooner. So maybe the next child won't have to go searching in DNA kits and fractured memories. Maybe they'll just hear it from the lips of someone who loved them enough to be honest. So what would you have done? Lana Whitmore.